Good morning. Today is 20 May, the year 2008. I'm Dr. Dave Thompson, a volunteer at the Palm Springs Air Museum here in California. Part of our mission is to record and preserve the history of our country's military conflicts, especially World War II and Korea and up to the present day. As part of the Veterans History Project of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., we conduct interviews of veterans and civilians who participated in those conflicts. Today, I'm here at the museum and have the honor and the privilege of interviewing Corporal Hugh Triffet. Corporal Triffet was an announcer on Armed Forces Radio in Japan from 1952 to 1954. So we're going to talk to him about that and a lot of other things. Hugh, nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Okay. First of all, Hugh, would you repeat and spell your full name for us, please?
The name is Hugh Triffet, and it's T as in Tom, R-I-F-F-E-T.
Oh, one T, okay.
One T on the end.
And when and where were you born?
I was born in Springfield, Illinois on September the 4th, 1931.
Okay. And so that makes you how many years?
76.
76. My gosh, well, you look well preserved.
Thanks.
And what was your father's name?
My dad's name was Charles Byron Triffet.
Springfield. That's the capital.
Right. My dad was a baker.
Did Abraham Lincoln? Did he live in Springfield for a while?
Yes, he did. In fact, we lived one block from Abraham Lincoln's tomb.
Oh, really?
And as a kid, my sister and I and my brother, we would go over and play all the time.
And so what did your dad do?
He was a baker.
Oh, yes, right, he was a baker. And how did he end up in Illinois? Where did your ancestors come from, or his ancestors come from?
Dad was actually born in Illinois, and so was my mom. Their parents were, his parents came from England, and her parents came from Germany.
Okay. And your mom, what was her name?
Mary Ellen Triffet. Rotter, I'm sorry. Mary Ellen Rotter.
Okay. And do you know what part of Germany her ancestors came from?
No, I'm sorry. We tried to look up the lineage, but we could never find it.
How about your dad back in England?
Dad came from a small town in northern England, and we understand that his grandfather was a shepherd.
Oh. And your grandfather, was he a baker also? Your dad's father?
No, I don't think so. In fact, I'm sorry, I just don't really know. Sorry.
No, that's okay. And did you have any brothers and sisters?
I have one sister, Charlotte, and a brother, Arthur.
And where do they live?
They live now in, my brother has passed away. My sister lives in Sunnyvale, and she was in the WACs.
Oh, she was?
And she was a nurse at Valley Forge Hospital in Washington, D.C.
Oh, really? Well, does she come to visit you here?
Often.
Well, we should bring her in and get her interview.
I have brought her here.
Oh, yeah?
And she really enjoyed it.
Oh, good. Well, let's bring her in sometime and interview her. That would be interesting. No, these interviews is when we try and get every aspect of military history, really.
Mm-hmm.
And a WAC that's a nurse, that's
she was my inspiration all the time, but I would say it.
How is she older than you?
She's 364 days older than I am. One day a year with the same.
So you almost had the same birthday.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember the street that you lived on in Springfield, or did you grow up there?
Yes.
Do you remember where your house was that you grew up in?
Was born on Lowell Avenue in Springfield, and then we moved to. We had about 3 or 4 addresses. We went over. We went also to Grandview Avenue, and what happened was that my uncle passed away in Tacoma, Washington, and left my parents a restaurant. So my dad and I and the family, we moved when I was 11 years old. We moved to the state of Washington, and I lived in Tacoma.
Tacoma. Oh, okay. you probably know Dick and Olive Clark. You know, they live in Gig Harbor. They've been friends out for a long time. So that's all.
Love Gig Harbor.
We've visited them a few times.
Love Gig Harbor. Yeah.
And so where did you live in Tacoma? What street?
I lived on 1515 North Cedar in the North End. And I had the privilege of graduating and going to Stadium High School. It's a historic high school in Tacoma. It was built for the Pacific Railroad, and then it looks like a castle, and they use it in movies and things like that now. And really enjoy that.
Okay. And was your family very religious? Did you go to church a lot when you were growing up?
No.
And where'd you go to grade? Well, when you got there, you were still in grammar school when you got.
When we got to Tacoma, I went to Mason Junior High School in the North End there, and finished there, and then went on to high school at Stadium.
And what kind of store was it that your dad? Did he run the
A
store?
restaurant.
A restaurant.
And
what was the name of the restaurant?
Raskellers. But he decided he didn't like it. So what he did was they sold it, and he went into the baking business. My dad was a baker.
Yeah, right.
And he opened he worked for Langendorf Bakeries in Tacoma for a long time.
Oh, okay.
And he loved. My dad was the type of man who would take a look at each piece of bread, and he could tell you how old it was, when it was made, and what was in it. Yeah.
Did you have any odd jobs when you were growing up? Did you help around the bakery or any stuff like that?
No, but when I was 12 years old, I was in downtown Tacoma, and I walked by a theater. It was not in the best area. It was down on what they call Pacific Avenue. And I walked up and they said, "You got a job?" And the guy said, "Can you cook popcorn?" And I said, "Sure I can." So I was a popcorn cooker at this theater called the Cameo Theater in Tacoma. And I stayed there until I was 19 years old. And I became a ticket taker and an usher and cashier, the whole thing. And it was there that I learned what I wanted to do when I grew up. I wanted to be a projectionist in a theater. Mm-hmm. And I had a lot of good buddies who were projectionists. In fact, one of my friends, his name was Ray Swally. He was a fighter pilot I've forgotten what carrier it was, mm-hmm. But he told some hair-raising stories that got me very interested.
In World War II?
Uh-huh.
Oh, gosh. I meant to ask you, let's see, how old were you when the war started, World War II?
I was probably...
Well, you were about 12, I guess.
Yeah,
around that
11
time.
12,
So do you remember what you were doing December 7th, 1941?
My sister and I were living in a little house in Springfield. We had a large side yard, and we'd just gotten bicycles in that September. And we were sitting and listening to the radio in the living room, and of course it was one of the old type of radios, And we heard about the war, and we all sort of sat down and watched it. And I didn't really realize how important it was, but I recall it because it was such an event. Right. And so Mom and Dad, we all would sit around and listen to the radio most of the time.
Yeah. Huh. Did you play sports in high school?
I played basketball and also football, but I was never on a varsity team or anything like that. I just didn't.
What did you kids do for fun when you were growing up in Tacoma, for instance, or both places for that matter?
This will sound odd. We used to go to the theater all the time, and we used to do a lot of acts and stuff like that. And my sister, she was very interested in nursing, and I had all of my friends. One of the most important things we liked to do was on Saturdays we'd go to a theater into Illinois that would run serials. And of course, when you're a kid, the serials were very, very important. And they became very important to me later on in life. And I'll get into that later.
Okay. Yeah, those serials, I remember those. And I've got several of them here in the library.
Uh-huh.
DVDs I've got
Well,
of some of the old serials.
Just to go further into serials, I now give talks on cruise ships,
Oh, you do?
and one of my talks is on serials.
All right.
And I have some video stuff that I could give you with that.
Oh, I love that.
And
Sure.
so that
We'll
would
talk about that, yeah.
yeah.
Another thing I can talk to you about later too is the living history exhibit that we have downstairs.
Mhm.
And what we want to get in that Quonset hut, there's like a square window there, to put a picture of like a girl from the 40s with long hair, as though she's taking your ticket before you go in
Uh-huh.
and watch the thing. And there'll be a little slot that people can make donations and drop it
Oh,
down.
I
But
see.
we haven't found a picture yet. Brooke and I have been looking for those. If you think about it, where we might be able to get something that would,
You want a ticket taker?
a ticket taker picture of a pretty girl, yeah, in the 40s with the 40s stuff.
Well, we used to have to wear a uniform. I was
Yeah,
a ticket
or a
taker.
uniform, yes, she would, yeah, or one, or even better, yeah, a girl in one of those uniforms, so.
Okay.
I'm sure there's gotta be some around somewhere. Today I was looking online a little bit, but I couldn't really find anything, so. Then, what year did you graduate then from high school?
Graduated in 1949.
49, and, so what did you do after graduation?
Well, what happened was that I was in the senior class play at Stadium High School, a play called Dear Ruth, and all of my friends, we remained friends throughout the years, and we always have a Dear Ruth get together. Well, while I was there, a gentleman came up by the name of Kimball, Mr. Kimball, and Mr. Kimball's invited most of the guys in the class to come down because they were just opening a new radio station in Tacoma at a vocational school, and I was selected, and I thought, oh, so that was my introduction to radio, and we went through all the different levels of writing and producing and announcing and becoming a disc jockey and all that type of stuff. So that. But it was all very, very, very fundamental, and it was for an FM radio station that could broadcast, maybe 2 blocks.
Right.
But we had a good time.
I remember the first FM, it was like a little tuner box.
Uh-huh.
You hooked it up to your regular radio. And the reason we got it, because I'm from southern Indiana, and so the high school basketball games, they had them on FM, so we had to get us to the game. I meant to ask you, do you remember your favorite teacher in high school?
Absolutely. Her name was Mrs. Saunders. And I know as we grow up and we are influenced by so many people, but Mrs. Saunders she became my inspiration because she taught me something that helped me so much the rest of my life, and that was typing. I don't know how far I would have ever gotten in life if I had not met Mrs. Saunders, who drilled into me those exercises. Knowing how to type got me so far in life, and if there's anybody watching this who doesn't know how to type, get out and learn.
You were in the senior play. Were you in the theater all during high school?
Not really. I just went down and auditioned and got the part.
Yeah.
And in high school plays are very big, and it took 2 months to rehearse, and we finally got it done.
Did you like that, man?
I enjoyed it.
So now, okay, you're down at the radio at this FM station, right?
In the Tacoma Vocational School.
What kind of music were you playing?
All transcriptions, and they were all public affairs type things, and we could not bring our own records. We had to play that because they were licensed to only play the different music that was supplied. There's a lot of middle of the road, a few name artists, but most of them were not. But I was introduced to George Shearing there because I used to play a lot of George Shearing, and he was one of the featured guys they had on the station.
So they weren't allowed to play any, I mean, they had to have rights to the music
Yeah.
to play it?
And it all had to be off the records that were supplied to the station. And there were there were about 10 cuts on each side, and there were the big transcriptions. I haven't seen any in years.
Yeah. And so how long were you there then?
I was at the station. One of the primary reasons for the station's existence was to teach the radio broadcasting, but we did a dual purpose. I got my radio telephone first class license, engineering-wise, from it. Because in those days, if you were going to be in the radio, you had to be what is known as a combo man. You had to be an engineer and an announcer, and that meant that you had to sign logs for the FCC. I don't think that's required anymore.
So how long were you with that station then?
I would say maybe a year and a half.
What were the call letters?
I hate to tell you, KTOY.
Okay,
KTOY Tacoma.
And where was what street was it?
It was on 11th Street, up the 11th Street Hill. And our tower was there and everything.
Was it 24-hour?
Oh, no, it was just daytime only when schools were.
Oh.
We had a big presentation of signing on and signing off every day. And every guy in there they had a shift for about an hour.
I see.
And from that school, there were a couple of very successful guys. And I feel that I was one of them.
Yeah. So where did you go from there then?
My first job was in Aberdeen, Washington as a combo announcer engineer. I was 20 years old. And
Tell me, what does an engineer do? Especially in those days.
an engineer, a combo man, meant that you played all the records and all that stuff, but you also took all the readings of the transmitter, made sure that the transmitter was in its correct parameters, and made sure that the tower lights were on. And
I'm listening to the radio every once in a while, and there'll be two things on at the same time. How does that happen? Somebody falling asleep and
Yes,
not paying attention?
right.
I mean, they should know that.
Oh, yes, oh, yes. Normally, something like that is an error. But as a transmitter engineer, there are guys whose entire life was becoming a transmitter engineer and a maintenance man. My forte was not in maintenance. Although I can do it and I enjoyed it, I preferred the broadcasting side of it all. I wanted the fame and fortune. See.
And Aberdeen, how big is Aberdeen?
About 18,000 people. It's on the coast.
And what were the call letters there on that station? Was that AM?
Oh, KBKW.
AM?
AM, 1450 on the dial. I don't think it exists anymore.
What hours were you on?
I worked when you're a newbie, you are assigned the terrible shifts. You're either 4 to 6 in the morning or 7 to 12 at night and Sunday mornings. And I worked them all. And basically I played records. And in those days, the normal routine of a disc jockey in those days was to play one female vocalist, followed by a male vocalist, followed by an instrumental, and then tons of commercials, then a repeat of the same thing. The gal who was so big when I was there was Rosemary Clooney.
Oh yeah. And were you with NBC, CBS, ABC, or any?
No, it was with Liberty.
Oh, I remember that.
Liberty
yeah.
Network.
Al Helfer. I used to listen to they had baseball games. At
Right.
Liberty.
They specialize in baseball games.
Yeah.
And let me tell you about some of those baseball games. They were fictitious.
Oh, they were.
They would read.
They would read
the copy of it coming over from a sports writer.
Right.
And
make it sound as though if you were there.
Then we'd run the sound effects of a crowd in the background. And here's the crack of the bat and all that type of stuff.
I'll be done. Did you see there was a a series. I think it was on PBS a few years ago. I forget the name of it, but it was about a radio station back in the 40s, I think, and the different characters that were on there, and they did a lot of that kind of stuff. It was really good. If you didn't see it, I think you would have enjoyed it.
I think it's WKRP or something in Cincinnati.
No, it wasn't. No, that wasn't it. It was a different.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure that was the one you're talking about. That's the one with the blonde girl.
Yeah.
No. This was totally different. A little bit like there was a movie out not too long ago, Garrison Keillor.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you saw that. It was about a radio station too. Back in those days.
Yeah,
I forgot what that was called.
I think I know what you're talking about,
Yeah.
but Garrison Keillor was a favorite of mine.
Yeah, I read some of his books and just he had kind of a radio announcer's voice, just real mellow.
Now, when I was a kid, we used to listen to Jack Armstrong.
Oh, me too.
Captain Midnight, Inner Sanctum, those type of things.
Yeah.
And that they all influence us, as we go along.
Yeah. Okay, so Aberdeen. So how long were you in Aberdeen?
I was in Aberdeen for about a year and a half, and then I got my induction papers. And I went to the station manager, and he says, well, maybe we can get you a deferment for a little while. And he did, and I forgot how long it was. I think it was maybe 3 months, but then I had to go.
And that's about time Korea was
Korea.
heating up.
Korea was on,
Mhm.
and it was I would say it was about 8 or 9 months before the end of the war.
Mhm.
But I had to go.
Yeah. So where did you go for your basic training?
Of course, the station had a party and everything, and everybody said goodbye, and I got on a train in Tacoma at the old train depot station, and along with 100 other guys, and we took an overnight rail ride down to San Luis Obispo, and I was brought into the Army Signal Corps. It was a training base for the Signal Corps. And I got into the Signal Corps primarily because I had that radio background. And we took the regular basic training that everybody else had to take. And then we were tested. And I originally went into cryptography. And I have a secret code clearance. Which became very important to me later on, and I didn't realize how important that was going to be. Well, anyway, after I went to school for about 8 weeks, I also, as a secondary MOS, wanted to become a high-speed radio operator because of my typing ability, and they needed those more than they needed crypto officers. In fact, there was
So a high-speed radio operator is...
teletype.
Oh, teletype. Okay.
And in those days, it was mostly teletype. And code messages were encoded and then put on tape, and then we'd type them out. And I went over... we were so important at that time to have it was more important to have a high-speed radio op than a crypto guy at that time. And so they said, we're going to send you overseas, and we need them right away, so we're going to fly you overseas. And I was one of the very few guys who got flown to Tokyo, and I landed at Camp Drake in Tokyo. And Camp Drake was a hellhole that everybody hated to go to because it meant destination Korea. And while I was at Camp Drake, I was stationed in. I was given an assignment to Allied headquarters in Tokyo, and Mark Clark was the general at that time, and I was assigned. They drove a group of us out, and while I was there, I was told that I have to wait because there were guys rotating back that we were going to replace crypto and high-speed radio ops, and it was going to be I was going to do one or the other. And as I was waiting in the day room, after about the second week, we had to wait until they were ready to call us in. I heard a radio, and I thought, what is that? They said, that's their local radio station broadcasting to the guys in the service. And I said, I could do that. And they said, well, one thing you have to have a secret code clearance to do it. And I said, I've got a secret code clearance. And so I called them up, and that was about 10:30 in the morning. And at 2 o'clock that afternoon, I was a member of Armed Forces Radio in Tokyo. And they came over in a 1952 Army green Chevrolet and picked up my duffel bag and me, and I just felt like a king. When I first went into the radio station, I did preliminary just announcing chores and a lot of news reading and very few interviews at that time, but I did some afternoon disc jockey work. The one thing they wanted me to do that I hated was to play Western music. And there was a gentleman who had a program called the Hanshu Cowboy. That was his title. And all he did was play Western music. And I thought, oh, and he was about to rotate back. And I thought, I just don't want to do that. But I did it for a while. And then AFRS decided that they were going to open up a new station in Sendai, Japan. And at that time, nobody had ever heard of Sendai, but it's only about 10 million people, and it's north of Tokyo. And so a group of us were sent up there to start a station up there. And that's where I spent the remainder of my time. And at that station, I was a disc jockey, I was the librarian, I did interviews, and just generally had a good time.
A couple things. I remember back in the 50s, American Western music was real big in Japan. I remember I was seeing on TV these Japanese guys that couldn't even speak English, but they knew all the words, and they would be singing the Western music. It was kind of fun. So maybe that's. And when I was in the Navy up in Newfoundland, up in Argentia, and this was late '60s, I had a shortwave, and I listened to AFRS radio up there, and there was a girl named Chris Noel that was on there, and I really liked her. She I don't know, like she played music and stuff like that. But,
one of the perks of working at a radio station was that we got to meet a lot of the visiting people coming through.
I was going to ask you about
and a lot of the entertainers from the states would come through, and we could interview them whenever. And there were so many, and most of them were not gigantic stars. Later on, Marilyn Monroe came, and I, unfortunately, saw her, but I didn't get to interview her. And of course, everybody was crazy about her. Let's see. They would often they'd get a request to use us in a Japanese film because they needed Caucasian-looking people because they were making their propaganda films. And I was killed in about 10 films.
Really?
It's interesting.
Yeah. So did you make some good friends over there?
Very, very good friends.
Any good Japanese? Did you meet many Japanese?
I met a lot, but I didn't retain their friendship after I left. About 3 or 4 of the guys at AFRS I knew later on in Hollywood, and we all had a few drinks and talked about it all of our war experiences.
And did you go anywhere when you were? Did you get leave, and did you travel around the Far East any at all while you were over there?
No, basically I stayed in either Tokyo or in Sendai.
And how were you treated by the Japanese people?
Absolutely perfectly. I admire the Japanese people very much. An interesting thing that happened was I wore glasses at that time, and Setsuko, our station employee, said she was reading an article in a Japanese newspaper about contact lenses, and I said, contact lenses? I'd be interested in that. And so she took me by the hand on a train and a trolley to a remote area in Tokyo, and I mean, I could not speak a word. And we went into this hospital, and it was not a hospital like we know it. And not being able to speak the language, I felt very vulnerable. But this they checked my eyes, and they wanted me to see talk about the different letters, and we got through all that all right. But then they decided they would try on the first contacts, and in those days, they were not the contact lenses like they are now. They were big spherical type things, and I still have them at home.
Oh.
And what you do is you put a saline solution in them, and with a suction cup put them in, and you had to be very brave to do it the first time. And I remember one time during this procedure when they were teaching me how to do it, that I fumbled a bit, and I didn't get all the fluid in the lens as possible. So this Japanese optometrist came, and he had a hypodermic needle. And I thought, oh, no. And not being able to speak the language, I was very vulnerable. But anyway, they just lifted it up and shot some in there. I wore those things for, maybe a year, and then I got my first pair of contacts there, all in Japan. And when I came back to the States, I met the gentleman who had the patent on, a man by the name of Dr. Tui. He had the patent on the contact lenses, and he interviewed me to find out exactly what procedure they used to do this.
Okay.
It was interesting.
That's interesting, yeah. So, did you come back to the States when you left?
Yes. When I came back on a ship, and it was a real rough voyage coming back.
What kind of ship was it?
I don't think it was a Liberty ship, but it was a big ship like that. And I remember standing and eating and the trays sliding down the table. You too. Huh?
Well, no, not really, but I can imagine.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Then I came back to the States, and I went back to my radio job in Aberdeen. But I thought, wait a minute, I've been to Tokyo. I just can't. I wanted to move on, and so I bought my first car.
Which was?
A '49 Ford, and we drove down to Hollywood, and I parked in the parking lot of CBS at Columbia Square on Sunset in Hollywood. Walked in, announced who I was, filled out the brochures, and they hired me right on the spot.
Really? Oh,
And so I thought, goodness gracious. Was
that KNX then?
It was KNX, but I worked for the network. KNX and CBS Television were in the same building.
Oh.
Now CBS.
Now what year was this then?
54. And they decided that I should go into to the CBS Television network.
Was that Channel 2 then?
It was Channel 2, but it was KNX. It was KNXT, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
But I didn't work for KNXT. I worked for the television, the network, over on Beverly and Fairfax in Hollywood. And I was a couple of the first shows. I was a cable man, and then I became a cameraman over there.
Oh, okay.
And I had a great career at CBS, and I worked a program called Playhouse 90,
Mm-hmm.
and Climax,
Mm-hmm.
and Studio One, and Twilight Zone. I had and as I told you a little bit earlier, I was a serial nut when I was a kid, and by that time the serials were out, but a lot of the people who worked in serials were now supporting actors. And so I had an opportunity to meet some of these marvelous people, and I became very good friends with them too.
And those are pretty much, some of those were live, were they
Oh
not?
yeah, mostly.
Playhouse 90.
It was all live.
Yeah.
All I worked was the live shows.
Do you have any of the kinescopes or anything for
Yes,
music?
yes.
I would love to make some for the museum here, if it's possible.
I had a very interesting experience one day. There's a director called John Frankenheimer. He was
Yeah.
a top-notch Frankenheimer, and it was a program. It was a Western of some sort, and in those days we would rehearse for 3 days, and then on the day of the broadcast we'd do 2 complete run-throughs and a dress rehearsal. And we had worked on this one show for 3 or 4 days, and everything went flawlessly. It was just exactly the way it should be. And then on air, one of the major cameras went out, and they could not fix it. So this meant that camera shots, had to be done by someone else with another camera. And so they brought in a spare camera, and a live show is an intricate puzzle, because you have to move and all the cables have to go, and the boom mics, all the lighting people, they all have to go with you as you move from one set to the other. So this is strategically, it's an important job. So the cameraman whose camera went out, he had to take this spare camera and try to duplicate the shots he had with the other camera. But that bad camera, which was out, had to go along with us on all of them, because cables were very important. You don't get all untied. So that was an experience. But in those days, we used to do car commercials, and I did a program called Climax, and Climax was an hour anthology every week with some of the major stars doing it, and that's where I met a lot of the people that I got to know. And when you're doing a show like this, you have a lot of downtime, because they're rehearsing in this particular set, and then you're going to be the next scene, but you're sitting there waiting for them, and during a dress rehearsal, rather during a rundown where they're getting shots and everything, you have a lot of free time, so you sit and talk. And one of my best buddies was Lon Chaney Jr.
Oh, really?
And we became really good friends.
Oh.
And also a woman by the name of Evelyn Varden, and they're all gone now, but she was a lovely lady, and she used to bring sandwiches in and talk, and she was a sort of a continuing character actress on a lot of
You
shows.
probably know Lon Chaney Jr. He was Creighton Chaney
Right.
first, and
Uh-huh.
then switched that to that. His daughter, we know her real well.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, Jerry Chaney. We go to we did know her at St. Louis Church, and she was a lector and stuff like that, like I was, and her grandchildren. I was in charge of the lectures there, and so I was starting to work with the little kids, and I got her grandkids, and some of them were really good. It's kind of the genes in the family, I suppose. So we know the Chaney family real well.
Oh, I had a ball.
Yeah.
And when I give my talks on serials,
I should put you in touch with Jerry sometime. She'd
I'd
probably
love
like
to meet her. I'd love
talking
to meet
to
her.
about her dad. Yeah.
I think her dad was just a great man, a great man.
I still my almost all-time favorite movie is High Noon, and he was in that.
Uh-huh.
You know, the old sheriff that Gary Cooper was trying to get to help him. Yeah. Oh, that was neat. Yeah. So what were the cameras like compared to the cameras you have today?
These were all black and white cameras.
Right.
They were called TK-19s. They were there's pictures of them all over the place, and they were a turret camera. We didn't use zooms. We flipped the tubes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so you know that with the next scene, the director or the assistant director would say, your next scene you'll start with this 70mm lens or a 135 lens, and so we used to have sheets of what we were going to do. We knew all of our shots, and we had rehearsed these. When you're in a live show like it, you rehearse it so long and so often, you know what to do.
Would the director, would he take your suggestions as far as the lighting
Oh, yes.
and this or that or
Oh,
whatever,
yes.
you know?
He knew what he wanted, and many times they'd come and he'd say, okay guys, sell me the best shot you can. And Frankenheimer became very famous because he let the cameramen do a lot of their like shooting through chairs and things like that, which was never done before, you know.
Yeah.
I know an interesting thing is that when you shoot from a helicopter, and I did some helicopter shooting, shooting from a helicopter is probably one of the most exciting experiences because you're seeing things like you've never seen before. And when we got the crane cameras and you're shooting down, you saw a lot more shots. You saw a lot more opportunities for shots than you knew. It was fun.
Oh, yeah.
And I did a lot of crane shooting too, where you sit on a crane and you go up in the air.
Was it all on the lot pretty much, or did you go out anywhere?
Most of the stuff was done at Television City, on stage 41 and 43, and the audience shows were done on stage 31 over there because they had a big audience seeing, and let's see. I'm trying to think of what the other stage. They had three, at the time I was there, they had three basic huge sound stages. And normally there were 5 to 6 cameras on each stage. We worked as a crew. We had a technical director and video men and cameramen, and then the cameraman had his assistants, the cable guys and the camera assistants. And so we all worked fine. And there was a lot of camaraderie.
Were you at CBS when the color came in?
Yes. Huge cameras. Huge cameras.
Now why? I mean, I'm sorry. They had one sip of what?
Thank you. You will.
Yeah. They had, Technicolor going back to the early 30s, and in some cases further back, two-strip and stuff like that. Why did it take so long for television to? The movies had Technicolor for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Why did it take so long for television to develop it? Was it the picture tube or what?
It was picture tube, and then also remember, transmitters had to be re-outfitted and all that type of stuff to emit these different types of color signals, and everything was like. If you had a camera like this in those days, this camera here is probably 10 times better than any of the cameras we ever used in the early days of television. And
Those are digital.
no, that none of
Okay, these are
Yeah.
digital. You didn't have any of them.
No.
Yeah, right.
the big television cameras. They were very cumbersome. It would take 2 of us to push it. And remember, we had all those cables that we had. And when you're doing a live show, you were just there was so many people involved in a live show, and no one ever saw that part of it because you're just seeing what's on the screen.
Yes.
But getting there and all the different guys behind the cameras, and like with each camera, there are 2 cablemen and a boom pusher, it could be a nightmare at times, but it was
You had to
fun.
be careful not to get the microphone
Oh,
or this
yeah.
or that in the picture, I guess.
And the reason why for so many rehearsals was to figure out how to get through the maze to get there.
And the cameras they use nowadays, what are they like compared to?
Well, they're very much so. They're a little bit bigger than this, but they're all.
Is it like you see the news reporters from Channel 2, like when they come out here and they got a camera like that,
Yeah.
when they're interviewing us or doing stuff?
Most cameras are now smaller, and especially now that everything's going high definition, those cameras are designed for high definition, and they're all on the smaller side. But in the days when we were doing a lot of news stuff, because later on I went to a station owned by Disney, and we did a lot of news stuff there, and they were the large type of cameras, because now they were holding their own battery and their own tape decks, and it was fun.
So how long were you at CBS then?
I worked at CBS for about 6 years.
Where were you living then? Or
I had a great little house in Hollywood. I mean, I was a swinging bachelor, man. And by that time I had a little MG, and I was just really enjoying life.
Yeah.
When Playhouse 90 went off the air, there were about 45 engineers that were affected. But at the same time that Playhouse 90 went off, Climax went off. And Climax and Playhouse 90 were on the same night, so we had duplicate crews. And so there were almost about 150 of us who were laid off. But because of my radio background, I went immediately to KFI Radio in Los Angeles, and I worked there for about about 7 or 8 months, and met a lot of wonderful people. And then an opportunity opened up at ABC TV, and I went over there, and I was a cameraman on the Lawrence Welk Show for about 6 or 7 months. And then I was going to get laid off again, and I went over to KHJ, Channel 9 in Los Angeles, an independent station. And that's where I really fell in love with television, because I had an opportunity to do it all. Now remember, at the networks you only do specific jobs. You're either a cameraman or a video man or an audio man, but at KHJ, being a smaller station, we were everything, which I enjoyed even better. Let's see.
What year was that you went to KSJ?
Probably about 1958. No, or 1959. And I was at KHJ for almost 35 years. Then Disney purchased the station and changed it to KCAL. And we were on the Paramount lot, and we did everything from golf shows to Academy Award shows. And it was just a fun time but by that time I had become a technical director, because I'd worked all the shifts and I knew what was expected of everything, and you're promoted as you go along. And I became a technical director, and basically I started doing newscasts. And but I hated that, because I had to get up so early in the morning or work too late at night.
So you by doing newscasts, you were an announcer? I mean, you
No, by
did
that
the
time,
news, or-
by that time I was strictly an engineer.
Okay, but you had to, yeah.
But the whole announcing thing helped me to get into it all.
Okay, yeah. And who were some of the newscasters that you were?
Ted Myers, Baxter,
Mhm.
Baxter Ward,
Yeah, right.
and Jerry Dunphy.
Yeah, oh yeah. He was at Channel 2.
He was at
for a
Channel
time.
7, and then no, excuse me, Channel 2. You're right.
Oh, wow, I
And
remember
then he
when I
came
first
over
came
and-
out here. Yeah.
I tell you, who is this one guy? Very popular. I'm sorry, I can't think of
Do you
his name.
remember the sports announcers that you had?
They're all.
They from time to time you did some Laker games or
Oh yeah, we did
Angels
those.
or
I did some Laker games too.
Yeah.
And they were interesting.
So you went out to the Forum or wherever they were playing.
Yeah. But
So how does that differ? I mean, as far as where are you?
well,
Are you
basically all the cameras are umbilical corded to the truck,
okay.
and you had to put your own cables in and all this stuff, and it was quite a
And
setup.
then would you work out of the truck during the game?
I would.
That's
right.
what you, yeah.
As a technical, I worked out of the truck with the audio man and the director and the producers as well.
And would you? How many cameras would you have usually in the at the game?
About 7.
And would you be the one to say, okay, we need this camera now and this, or?
No, that's the director's job.
The director's job, oh.
I would be setting up all the effects and switching the cameras,
Yeah.
and helping the director at times. But the director, that's his assignment.
Did you ever meet Chick Hearn?
Oh yes, yeah. Worked with him often.
Yeah,
And Chick Hearn was a wonderful guy. You have to touch me you have to refresh me with some of these names because I've forgotten.
Yeah.
One of my best friends was I'm trying to think of his name now. So, sorry, I'm having a mental breakdown here.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Was he a sports guy too?
He did everything. Ted Myers.
Oh.
Ted Myers was an announcer par excellence. He was a writer. He was a newsman, and he could also do lots of sports. Just a wonderful man.
And where were you living most of the time when you were there?
I was by that time I was married, and I was
Oh.
living in Fullerton.
And your wife? Where did you meet her?
I met her in Hollywood. She was a gal from England, and we were married for about 15 years.
What was her name and her maiden name?
Her name was Sally, and her maiden name was Collins. And we had one son named Charles, and they're both living over in the. I've sort of lost track of her. We were divorced.
Oh, okay. And your son, where does he live?
He lives in Laguna Beach.
What does he do?
He's in sales, some sort of sales.
Any grandchildren?
Not that I know of. No.
So, okay. And so, where'd you say you lived in Fullerton for the most part?
I lived in the north end of Fullerton, right next to the courthouse. Built a house. I built my own house.
Oh, you did.
And when I sold it, after about 27 years, it gave me an opportunity to become financially independent.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's when you retired?
Yes.
Okay. And so what year did you retire?
I retired from KCAL television in I should have brought all of
No, that's
them.
all right.
But anyway, and then I formed my own company
Oh.
called Award Images. And I made industrial films, sales presentations, and a lot of commercials, primarily automobile commercials. And in fact, I wanted to come down to Palm Springs to make commercials, but I had all I could handle up there.
It's like Cal Worthington and those kind of.
Cal Worthington, right.
Animals.
John Force, the director, the sports car driver, and I did it. But anyway, I did a lot of car commercials, and on many of my shows at Award Images, I would do my own announcing also, and this way we could go in with a smaller budget, and I enjoyed it. And I did all the editing and all the audio there, all that. Now, you know all about me now.
No. So when did you quit doing that?
About I lost a major client that I had. The client passed away, and I was doing a lot of things for for a Mexican American Heritage Museum in Los Angeles, and then that sort of petered out, and so I didn't want to take on any more car commercials, and so when I moved down here, I thought I'll just kick back and do some small things, and I just never have gotten off. Just never gotten off the dime to do it. That's all.
When did you first start coming to the desert?
About 3 years ago.
And what brought you down here? Or had you visited here before?
I had a business partner with Award Images, and we did films up at Lake Arrowhead. In fact, we did a monthly show up there. And at one particular time, we thought, well, let's come down here and do them too. And we came down here and we looked around. And but basically, I had a place up at Lake Arrowhead, and that's where I stayed. Excuse me.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're going to edit this, not me.
No, I'm not going to edit it. So, did you buy a place down here then?
Mm-hmm. From the sale of my home in Fullerton, I bought a nice little place here, and I've got a pool. And
where is it?
it's, the Rio del Sol,
Which
on
is-
Gerald Ford, and
Oh, yeah.
and I have one of the casitas,
Uh-huh.
and I overlook a beautiful green belt that has 2 pools and a lake.
Is that off of Duval? I mean, off
Plumley.
of
Plumley. It's
Plumley.
Plumley is between Duval and Dave Palm.
Right. You know, boy, it sure seems Jerry Cheney lives either in there or right close to there.
Really?
Yes, he does. Yeah, because I've been over to her house. I think it may be that same complex that you're in.
I'd love to meet her. I'd
Yeah,
love to meet her.
yeah, she's a great girl.
Now, her dad's been dead.
Yeah.
Many years
Yes,
now.
he has. Yeah, he has. So, how did you get involved with the Air Museum?
I think I saw a squib in the paper, and I thought that sounds like something I'd be interested in doing, and so I came over and he accepted me, and I went through their courses. Now, I love all the airplanes. I just love them all. But I like to talk to people, so that's the reason I'm really into it.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. And just to be around all these guys and hear, listen to their stories and stuff, it's just wonderful. Yeah, it is.
Can I ask you some questions about you?
Well, let's,
All right.
why don't we finish this? Yeah. So, over the years, did you have any hobbies or interests besides your work?
Basically, I had very few hobbies because I was just so tied up in my work. I mean, from the moment I woke up in the morning until I went to bed at night, I was in television, and it was interesting.
How about now?
Now, I've sort of given up my all of my television stuff, and I like high definition television, and I sit and I watch a lot of it, and still help direct some of those shows that are on there.
Yeah, I bet you could still do a good job.
I went to the television stations here locally, and I was very interested, but they don't want to hire part-time people. They want full-time people.
What you might be interested in, Cathedral City High School, they have a film production class, and my real good friend teaches that, and he just got another grant. He got a grant about 3 or 4 years ago, and I had the kids come over and do some interviews of some of the veterans, and they I'll have to show it to you. They put together about an hour-long
Interesting.
I got a DVD. So I'm sure he'd love to have you come over and talk to him sometime.
I'd love to, I'd love to.
So I'll put you in touch
Now,
with him.
one thing I have done is, since I've been here, I joined the senior television TV group out of Palm Desert.
Yeah.
And we went out and we did, it's a very, very loose video production. And went out and we did we did a big film on model airplanes at the airport over near Thermal.
Yes.
Have you ever been there?
But I didn't see that model airplane. I've been to the airport though. Yeah.
But that senior TV sort of disbanded.
Well, but we'll get you. I'll get you together
I'd like to
with
I'd
Matt.
like to meet him
Yeah,
very much.
Yeah, probably maybe pretty soon because they'll be going out. School will be ending here pretty soon. So anyway, he got another grant, and so he's interested in getting involved over here again with the kids and stuff.
I'd be delighted.
Great. Yeah. Okay, I think we're about ready to wrap it up here. Any closing thoughts, Hugh?
Closing thought. Let me gather my. Being drafted, having the career I had in broadcasting at Tokyo and at Sendai, gave me the opportunity to begin a whole life that I never knew I would ever have. From it came Hollywood, came a lot of friends, and came a whole different way of life. And it just proves to you that being drafted is not all that bad.
Yeah, that's right. I mean,
I would never have had the opportunity if all that had not happened.
Hugh, thanks for coming in and sharing with us, sir.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Okay, that was great. That was great.
So basically, you were just leading me down the line.
That's it.
See,
Yeah.
I had no idea you were going to